Hello everyone, my name is Brooks Mann, and in the article of Mann Gulch, I'm going to be covering the section on applying lessons learned from the article to organizational diagnostics and problem solving. So as mentioned earlier with the other presenters, we're presented in the article of Mann Gulch of some smoke jumpers who are trying to put out a fire in the Montana area and what problems they encountered. So I'm going to highlight several different topics, high level, and then I'm going to jump into more detail on what those were. So from this article, we talked about mathematical modeling, um, organization and organizational structure definitions, cosmology philosophy, decision making versus sense making, disintegration of a group, and sources of resilience. So with that being said, jumping over to the very beginning or the very first lesson learned was mathematical modeling. So one of the things the author did to understand more about the fire and the spread of fire was he taught himself mathematics and turned to mathematical modeling. Matter of fact, he worked with two mathematicians who built models to determine how fires spread. The next thing is understanding, organization and organizational structure is very important. So minimal organizations or smaller organizations, they're more susceptible to losses than larger organizations are. And this includes five different activities, and that's coordination by direct supervision, strategy planned at the top, little formalized behavior, organic structure, and the person in charge tending to formulate plans intuitively. So the next lesson learned we talked about, or I brought up at the beginning, was cosmology philosophy. Now this can be a little confusing because it's more of a high level philosophical approach, but basically what it is it refers to a branch of philosophy often subsumed under metaphysics that combines rational speculation and scientific evidence to understand the universe as a total phenomenon. So it's the ultimate macro perspective. It directs issues at space, time, change, and contingency that relate to the origin and the structure of the universe. So kind of understanding what this was important for determining how these fires were spreading and kind of what went wrong with the approach. The next topic is decision making versus sense making. So this is very important to understand because it happens a lot in organizations and companies today. So sense making basically emphasizes that people try to make things rationally accountable to themselves and others. This is different than decision making because decision making is more about strategic rationality. It's built from clear questions and clear answers to remove ignorance. Sense making is more about contextual rationality. It's built on vague questions, muddy answers, and negotiate agreements that attempt to reduce confusion. So one of the key things the author highlights here, and it's important with companies and organizations today, is you can be good at decision making, but you can still ultimately fail. And how that happens is because you are deficient in sense making. So you can be good at making decisions, but if you fail to have an understanding of the sense, then you can still fail. And this is kind of what happened in the article here. You see these smoke jumpers coming in, and they're guided by their leaders in their group, and they're making decisions, they're executing, they're following, but they really don't have a sense of that. And the example that I can give most clearly is, in the article it says that one of the guys was stopping to take a picture of the fires. So, the other smoke jumpers feel that, well, maybe the fires aren't as severe or aren't as deadly or dangerous because, he's taking pictures. Another guy was, eating his dinner on the way up to one of the fires. Again, this doesn't perceive it as a urgent matter or as a threat. So the next topic that we talk about is disintegration of group. There were also problems with the structure of the group. The major contributor was to this huge disaster was the loss of the only structure that kept these people organized, which was their role system. So at the beginning of the article, it mentions that these smoke jumpers were all young, ages ranging from like 17 to 28. And with that being said, out of all these smoke jumpers that landed here to fight the fire, only 3 people survived. And first two being Sally and Rumsey. The reason why they survived the fires is they stuck together. So their small group that they formed of 2 people, it didn't disintegrate. And because it didn't disintegrate, it helped them keep their fear under control, and they ultimately escaped. Wag Dodge, he was another gentleman. He was the former group leader, and he still presumed that the group existed. So he believed that he was still leading a group, and he had a group to lead to safety. Um, because of this, he also continued to think that about the group's well-being, which also helped him keep his fear under control. So ultimately, he escaped too. He found like a narrow passage, and he escaped. A quote from this article reads that if you throw people into unfamiliar roles, leave key roles unfulfilled, make the task more ambiguous and unclear, discredit the role system, and make all these contexts within the change, small events can combine to something monstrous. And that's basically, what happened here in this case is, we have people not familiar with roles that they're in, not really knowing, are they there to fight fires or are they there to just survive and escape? Um, Ultimately, it led to it was disastrous, and that's the same for organizations and businesses today. If you don't have a good structure set up in place, things will not be or result in success. And last but not least was the sources of resilience. So sources of resilience, the author mentions improvisation and bricolage, virtual role systems, the attitude of wisdom, and respectful interaction. So with these sources of resilience and adhering to these principles of sources of resilience, you're able to, even when things don't go as planned, or the execution is not executed properly, you can still be resilient and in times of adversity and still make the best of a situation and reevaluate your approach. So in this case, obviously when things started going wrong, it's almost like they hit the panic meter, and the group disintegrated and things fell apart, and then many people unfortunately lost their lives. So resilience is another key thing to keep in mind whenever you're making decisions. So these basically are the high level and detailed descriptions of the lessons we learned in this article for organizational diagnostics and problem solving. Thank you.